Welcome to L'Exclusive, the podcast by Paper Street Web Design and Marketing. As always, I'm your host, Nancy, our Client Relations Manager. And today I'm joined by Alex, our Vice President and Internet Marketing Director, as well as Pete, our CEO and overall General Guru. Today, we will be discussing the top misconceptions lawyers have about digital marketing. These will connect to both your website design and your actual marketing campaigns. They're things we've seen clients either say to us or do with their website and marketing, and we're here to help provide some helpful hints to you so you can avoid these mistakes in the future and just get better advice to plan for the year ahead, especially as this year draws to a close. All right, let's kick right into it. And I think one of the most important things we'll be here to talk about is the website design. When clients come to us, we talk about their design first and foremost because your site design is important. Thus, our first top 10 misconception is your website's appearance doesn't matter. Alex and Pete, what would you have to say about that?
So one of the most common misconceptions is the website appearance doesn't matter. I actually blogged about that back in 2003 was our original newsletter about that. We did the top 10 horrors of bad web design, and it still stands true about 20 years later. Bad design, obviously looks outdated. There are some classic patterns you can use that will stand the test of time. Some of our sites we've had up for 5-10 years even. And if you're using a clean white space design, those will actually almost always look good, even in the future. But if you're using very trendy design patterns, that could need to be changed almost on a yearly basis.
In addition to that, I just think from a branding perspective and a visual perspective, in and of itself, clients are going to start looking at you compared to your competitors, and then just making sure that, especially on just a responsive level as well, that everything functions perfectly and is up to date. I mean, candidly, it has to reflect somewhat of the year that you're in. So if a site just starts to look archaic and looks antiquated, that definitely affects, I think, user experience and conversions and the entire kit and caboodle of somebody coming to your site and having it reflect the firm properly.
Correct. Yeah, I believe also, even if you do have like a classic white space design, you'll probably still want to be able to update the typography over times. You'll be able to update the sizes for mobile, desktop for the different design patterns you can do. And you'll definitely want to be updating the site code from PHP 7 to PHP 8 to eventually PHP 9. You'll be wanting to update, obviously, WordPress, the backend, ADA compliance, all the nitpicky stuff that makes a site work too. So the appearance matters. And if you're not updating the code base and you're not updating the design, it actually can affect your overall performance.
Yeah, you can't live in a bubble and assume that the client is only going to look at your website. Maybe you'll have some great selling features on your site, or your brand will just speak for itself. But if you go on the assumption that your potential client is going to look elsewhere, if you're the one that looks older and outdated and archaic, or maybe even doesn't load properly, it's going to say something about you. Why don't they take the time to pay attention to my website? Maybe they won't pay attention to my claim. You have to try to realize you're not in a bubble. You have to compete. You have to be able to show you're with times, you're here to help. And especially with everything becoming so digital post-COVID, even meetings are happening on Zoom and things like that. So if you don't look tech savvy, it says something about your firm in general.
It's funny. I use analogies all the time, as most people know. That know me. And I always compare it to a kitchen in a home. When somebody buys their home or something, their kitchen looks like the latest and greatest, and they're so happy with it. And then very shortly thereafterwards, all of a sudden, the kitchen can start looking very, very antiquated. And especially when you start seeing some newer and later and greater kitchens, and, you go back and all of a sudden this kitchen that you once had that you were proud of, doesn't necessarily match up to the standards of that day. So it's a similar analogy in that sense.
And it's interesting too, because that just jumps into the next misconception too, where it stresses just how much your design comes at a price. It has to be balanced out. Because the next misconception we have is that site's appearance are most important. And unfortunately, sometimes when you start running with your design, other things get overlooked. Pete, Alex, what would you say about that?
Yeah, the design matters. Don't get me wrong. But there are also other considerations you want to make for the website. Speed is important these days, not just for ranking high in search, but just overall functionality of the website. Do you need to have a fast loading site so people get around the site? Does it load fast on mobile? Does it load fast on lower bandwidth phones? You just basically have to not just consider design, but you need to consider speed. Alex, you got other ones?
A fundamental principle in design is, and I'm going to go back many moons to years ago when I was once a creative director. The standard, the mantra is form follows function. And that is the standard principle of really good design. And so that's essentially what we're talking about here. I mean, if the form, the design principle itself doesn't provide good and solid functionality, then it's not executing the way that it should. So to the point that Pete made, there's so many facets that come into play there: speed and functionality, the information itself and how that's laid out, the hierarchy of that information. And then most importantly, especially on a marketing side, it's the conversion side of it all as well, and that's actually in this day and age referred to as conversion rate optimization, looking at how that functionality of your website works, not only in the design, but then comes across to actually produce potential new clients. So it matters a huge percentage, not only on the visual side, but on the functionality side.
Yeah, Alex, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to clients where they want this sleek site, they want little information, things like that. But what ends up happening is information gets buried. You spend so much time trying to keep the site condensed that law firms will forget to say, what are your practice areas? If you just have a homepage with a name, are you a CPA firm? Are you a law firm? What is it that you do? Where are you located? And I think sometimes if you get too focused on keeping things in a certain design theme, you may forget that someone's probably double screening when they're using your site. Can they get to your information quickly? Can they contact you quickly? You don't want to make their journey more complicated than it has to be.
Sure.
Agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, we run into this slope of where we're saying your site appearance matters, but then it has to have certain degrees of limitations and things like that. And then sometimes the clients get overwhelmed. And then that leads into the next misconception that unfortunately we see a lot, where the clients will say, well, you know what? I just need something to come out there and function, so I'm going to hire the cheapest web designer because in the end, it's all the same. Is that true? Of course not. Alex and Pete, what would you say?
Yeah, design matters. Like going back to points 1 and 2, people that have been designing long enough can know what to anticipate for the client's needs. A lot of times our agency can head off issues before they even start. And so that's one of the advantages of working with a designer that's been in the business for 20 years. We know what to expect. We know what questions the clients are going to have. We know what can and won't work. There's always, good new talent coming out there, but sometimes you get trapped into the latest trend, and then that trend will backfire either when you're trying to go to maintain the site or just won't look good when it actually goes to dev and so forth. So you definitely want to have a web designer with experience that's run a few law firm websites. And then the more experience they have, the better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, again, to Pete's point, there are things that it's like the flavor of the week, it's what the latest trends are, but those trends start going away. There's something to be said about, taking the classics and how that classic formation or design or template, I guess I should say, or background, blueprint, if you will, effectively looks, because there's, don't fix it if it isn't broke type of thing. But with that being said, I mean, you can obviously apply the latest and greatest visual side of things onto a custom website and a custom design. And it goes back to, like Pete said, the summation of the 2 points that we made earlier. Not only is the design critically important, but then how that actually functionally comes into play is what matters most. So it's literally almost like an equation. It's A plus B type of thing. So.
Yeah, and one thing you want to also work with is, in the legal industry, there are a lot of good web designers out there. One thing you want to work with is someone that actually has legal knowledge, so you don't have to sit there and explain the difference between a patent, a trademark, and a copyright, that they've worked with like intellectual property firms before, and you don't have to go through the details with a new designer, what the differences are and how your firm works. So that, having a background in legal knowledge definitely helps.
And you're also going to want to see a larger body of work, I think, as well, too, because a lot of times with the cheaper web designs, they'll have a jack of all trades where they have like one template that they're using and it looks great on one or two sites. But then when you realize that like 7 sites have the exact same format and it just starts to look all cookie cutter and things like that, you don't want to do that, because you begin to wonder how much of their knowledge is really there, or just are they good at this particular theme. And then the problem becomes, if they can only work with this one theme, what if you add another feature down the line? Is your whole site going to crash? Is it going to adjust everything that there's no point in way to go back and things like that? So, again, a lot of times the law firms will say, hey, I just need this site because I'm using it for word of mouth referrals, or I'm just using this site to just get myself up and running. And you go with the cheap option. But when you don't need that cheap option anymore, can it grow? Can it build? Can it evolve to where your business has evolved?
Yeah, it's a good point, Nancy. Actually, I'll summarize that and not even sugarcoat it. You get what you pay for, right? So it's like everything in life. So, if you're going to take the bottom route right away, then that's obviously going to potentially affect things later on.
Yeah, it's not so much in the short term. A lot of times you can be cost effective on initial build, but what's going to happen is a month after launch or several months after launch, you're going to want to change something. And that's where a lot of times the cheap option won't be able to be changed, or it's going to be very hard to change, or there's going to be a lot of bloated code. We've inherited so many sites that, they're using a base WordPress theme, or not a base, or some theme they purchased, but then we get into it and there's like 35 plugins that have been installed, whereas most of our core WordPress builds will have maybe 5 installed. And so that goes down to getting plugin happy, to where you can have, plugins are great. They can do all sorts of things, but if you start, every plugin you install almost always makes a database call. And so your site becomes slow. Instead of loading in less than a second, it starts taking 2, 3, I've seen as high as 10 seconds for a page to load, because they had so many plugins installed. And then after about 6 months to a year, the plugins start to conflict. And then you'll start having to go in there and update the code, because some of the plugins are overwriting each other data. Maybe the plugin manufacturer stops producing the work, and then now you have to redo the work. So that's kind of where the technical know-how and how to work with WordPress. And we're using WordPress as an example because it runs a majority of law firm websites out there. Yeah.
Now that we've covered the actual design itself, one of the things that is actually most important for your actual website is the content that of it appears on your site. Because it has to look good, it has to function, but then what are you saying to your clients? And one of the misconceptions that we run into a lot is the law firms are hesitant to present like legal questions and issues to clients. Like they say, well, if I provide too much information on the site, if I make things too easy for the client, they're not going to hire me. But we know that's not to be the case. Alex and Pete, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I recommend more information on your website as possible. A great way of doing that is frequently asked questions. I'm not saying give away 100% of the answer. And even if you gave away the 100% of the answer, you're still probably going to need a lawyer to either file a motion or something like that, or resolve the issue, or draw up a contract. But if you give away the answer, you'll seem like a knowledge source. You'll be the go-to source for them, and they'll convert. And then you can also rank high in search, so you can get new leads. So always explain stuff online. One rule of thumb we do at Paper Street is if we're writing detailed paragraphs of information back to a client on why to do something, we almost always turn it into a blog post. We strip out client information, of course, but any question that you're writing in detail, anything that you're having to, really explain to a client can become a blog post, which means someone else has that question. You can rank high for that. So just a good technique.
I don't have nothing further to add. I think Pete just explained everything wonderfully. No. I mean, that was spot on, because I mean, again, it's, you're the whole position is to demonstrate that your firm is that quintessential leader, that industry leader. And so what better way to do that than to answer your clients or your potential new clients' questions? So, and I mean, I think, again, to the point that Pete made, they're still going to have to hire a lawyer. They're still going to have to, have somebody write up a contract or file a motion. And so, I mean, what better way to demonstrate that you are that quintessential leader by answering their questions? And not only that, but I just think on a human level, if, think about it from a perspective of a potential new client, they come to a website and you're answering everything that they have in their own mind. You are that source, you're the one that is basically the solution to their problem.
And I think the flip side is also true. If you actually show information, they may not have even known to ask. You may have questions that you answer that show they actually need to hire you, because maybe they thought they could just file custody with the other parent. Yeah, it's good. We're fine. Nothing's gonna happen. And then you talk about, well, what happens if you move? What happens if you disagree about schools? And that's when they realize, oh, wait, this isn't that easy. I do need a lawyer. So it could go the complete opposite way, where you're thinking, well, if I answer their question, they're not going to hire me. By answering some questions, you may actually have gained a surprise client that they didn't even realize they needed you. Sure. And Pete, you brought this up, and it comes into the next misconception, where a lot of law firms are hesitant to have a blog, but you just demonstrated the need for having a blog. So again, we'd like to shine light on this misconception that law firms need a blog. You do need a blog. And Alex, Pete, let's tell them why.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be a blog per se. You can call it something else. You can call it news. You can call it resources. We call it education under Paper Street, although the original URL is /blog. We just like to call it something other than blog. But you need to have an easy mechanism to update the site. I've been talking this for almost 20 years now. So the key thing is having a system to where you can easily update and post information on your website, whether that's on your practice area pages and adding more frequently asked questions or things like that, or having subpages to those practice areas, whether it's having a blog, whether it's having a news. It needs to be able so that you can write, you can publish, it can be indexed, and it can be categorized correctly on your website. Those are the real keys that I see.
As I mentioned earlier, I use analogies all the time. I'm going to use two analogies of why a law firm needs a blog. So stay with me very quickly on these two. Number one, if you think of your website and the core content of your website, the practice area content, as a rocket, a main rocket, think of your blogging content as your booster rockets to that main rocket. It's supporting it, and then using that same analogy, if you were to just fire off a booster rocket on its own, it may get the job done. It may, create lift. It might get up into the air, but it's in support of. And so that's one of the best ways that I always encourage firms to think about it, in the sense that you're doing this in support of a lot of the other information that you're defining, again, that you are that quintessential leader. And that all fundamentally goes back to your core content, to your practice area content that you have. So that's analogy number one. Analogy number two is, I always say, you're trying to be found in the universe of the internet. Sorry, they're both space analogies. I'm a space nerd. But you're trying to be found in the internet or the universe of the internet. If you think of your core content as the size of your planet, you obviously want a lot of really good core content. That makes you Jupiter. But if you think of your blogging content in this analogy as the satellites coming out from that planet, the more that you can deploy, the greater chance that you're going to be found. The greater chance that you actually can be seen. So fire off as many blogs as you could potentially do in the universe to hopefully be uncovered.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to realize, as you're talking about sending the rockets into space, you have to choose the relevant rockets. In other words, make your blog posts something that actually will be found. I think a lot of firms try to just use their blog or their insights or their education site just to show almost like press releases and things like that. But chances are the people who are looking for your site, and if SEO matters to you, they're not just going to be searching for the awards you won. They're going to search for questions and answers. So a lot of times, like I said, I meet with these clients and tell them that your blog shouldn't just be telling you how wonderful you are. You actually need to discuss issues and matters relevant to your potential clients.
Sure. Yeah, it kind of piggybacks off the last question, which is, answering legal questions. And like Pete said as well, if we at Paper Street, as we all know, get a question asked more than once or twice, in a week, that becomes a blog post. I mean, that's one of those things where other people presumably have the exact same question. So answer it in a blog and, become that quintessential resource.
And again, like I said, our misconceptions just segue right into each other so easily. We're talking about SEO here, so let's continue with our SEO theme. I think, Alex, you and I know this one the best, but I think one of the biggest issues that we face when we talk to our potential law firm clients is they think that SEO results will happen fast. That is a huge misconception, and let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I'm going to bifurcate this into two different discussions. The first is brand new websites, and the second is existing sites that may have just structural problems. You actually can rank high. I'm going to zag a little bit. You can rank high if you have an existing site that has lots of backlinks and there's just some structural technical issue to the existing website. Maybe it could be as silly as there was no index set to the site, so it was not being indexed. And so we remove that. Site gets indexed. Lo and behold, they have 500 backlinks out there, and they suddenly start ranking high for all sorts of practice areas. That's a real simple issue. Could be more complex than that, to where there's just technical issues with the page loads. Maybe they're loading slow. Maybe they're just arcane. Maybe the format's not good. Maybe it's just, the user data and analytics on the site aren't great. And we fix that, and they can start ranking high because, again, they have the authority. What they've been prevented to is the actual technical site, or maybe the content isn't good. So I've seen that happen, to where a month after launch, technical issues are resolved and content's updated, and the site starts ranking high because of their authority. Then there's the issue of a site doesn't have authority. They're brand new. They don't have anything. Those are going to take a lot longer to rank high, and I'll let Alex kind of go into those.
Yeah, it's the marathon versus the sprint sort of perspective, and I think, again, to Pete's point, that if there is a website that already has some authority and relevancy established, it's much easier to gain traction. If we fall back to my analogy, even though we were talking about blogs, but if we talk to my analogy or go back to my analogy about a rocket, think of it as one is already in the air. One has taken flight. The initial one, the one that is a brand new site, has yet to get off the ground. So it's going to take a lot more. And just like a real rocket, it takes a lot more power. It takes a lot more invested into it to get that lift, to get it off the ground. So, it just takes that time. And I also think that changes. And I think this is critically important. It changes as internet marketing changes. Years ago, again, when, 10 plus years ago, with Pete and I both looking at how rankings would go, just with our client base at that time, things happened, I think, a little bit quicker, but the competition has grown, just from digital marketing in general. And because of that, the competition is that much more fierce, So again, what everyone is fundamentally doing to prove to search engines is that you are that industry resource. You are that quintessential resource. So if you have a brand new site, you're starting off that you have to kind of prove that and show that. And like we said, it's both with the content side and also with that authoritative power that's behind your site.
Right, the link building side, because a lot of times I think people get a little confused about what it really entails to rank with SEO and how to get high up on that. And it's not just good content. It's not just good speed. You also need the backlinks. You need the listings and directories with high domain authorities and things like that. So unless you have someone working 24/7 doing everything you need, it's going to take some time just to do and implement all of the pieces that you need. And as you said, with the marathon, not a sprint, Google changes, algorithms change. So even if you have a perfect site that ranks highly one day, it could completely change the next day because Google's algorithm changed. So you have to constantly look at it and adjust things and take place. And again, it may take a while to figure out what Google's algorithm actually did. What is it that they did? That John Mueller and them don't exactly tell us what it is we need to know about how to get sites to rank highly. Otherwise, I think all of us would be out of our SEO jobs if everybody could do it overnight.
That said, the principles of it, though, should, that goes into the quality and vetting of who you're hiring to help you with your SEO. Because again, and point very well taken that if, algorithms change, but the fundamental principles shouldn't necessarily affect things too greatly. So.
Absolutely. And that actually, once again, segues into our next misconception of whether or not you can teach yourself SEO. Okay, so we're going to put this one as a caveat misconception because we want to say, yes, you can teach yourself SEO, but you should touch base with professionals. You do need some help, and it's important to constantly stay up on things. So SEO is not something you can teach yourself overnight. Yeah,
in short, there are tons of books and information out there. And I've seen solo practitioners teach themselves SEO and get ranked high for very especially for their practice areas and so forth. But in general, maybe their time would have been better spent being a lawyer. So that's one of our things. So I urge everyone to actually know the basics of SEO so they know that content's important, that the technical optimization of the site's important, that the meta keyword tag is no longer ever used, and things, basic stuff that they need to know out there so that they can actually, when they do hire an agency, they can know, a good one from a bad one. At the same time, do you need to know how to properly install a schema code onto onto your practice area pages and things like that and location pages? Probably not. That might be for your developer or SEO agency to work out with you. So, there's things you need to know about. And we have checklists out even on our own website of things you should know and like glossaries and stuff like that. And there's things that you might want to leave to an expert, just like, in law.
It's a partnership and collaborative effort. And I think, as Pete just summarized, it's some of the best campaigns that we have here at Paper Street are those, the ones that are collaborative, and, the clients are very well educated on the standard principles of SEO. Because what that does is it gets right down to the crux, gets down to what we actually have to definitively look at, to the fundamental understanding of certain things, of why it works and how it works. And we can get down to things that are maybe glossing over stuff that are myths or misconceptions or false information, and get down to actually the stuff that truly matters. So that partnership of relying on a source that knows what they're doing to help be that guidance and education, I think is just evident. It actually shows itself. So when working with a firm that can get the job done.
Yeah, and it's important to touch base with this firm or whoever you're going to work with early on, because I've seen it where somebody tried to do SEO on their own for the site for a while, and it turns out to become more work to fix things had it been if they touched base with a professional initially. For example, the way they set up their content, where if they put content in the wrong places or set up poor menus or had duplicate content without even recognizing it and things like that, where it needs to be fixed, as opposed to if you met with a professional early on and we provided the guidance for you, you read the appropriate manner and things like that, where it'll be a quicker fix and it can be less of a recovery rate. So in other words, we could quickly fix things for you or optimize something for you and early on and let you know what you need to do in the future, rather than putting yourself on a bad path and having to fix it overnight.
Yeah, agreed.
Then we talked a lot about content and link building and things like that, but one of the important aspects of SEO is your actual keywords that you select. And we're going to dive into this next misconception about keywords, because I think a lot of times attorneys focus on keyword volume. In other words, I want to get the phrase that everyone searches for, and that's how I'm going to rank. But we're going to argue with you that keyword volume is not your most important element. And Alex and Pete, let's explain why.
Yeah, so Google will definitely give you all the search volumes and so forth out there. But a lot of times they won't give you when it's less than 10 per month. And you could actually have a fairly successful campaign of niche practice areas, and an aggregate would add up. So let's say you had 20 keyword phrases that all have a roughly 5 to 10 visits per month. You're looking at 200 visits then. If you converted, let's say, 10, even a small number of 10% of those, that's 20 inquiries, per month, which would be a good amount of leads. And you could sign another 10% of those, and you sign 2 clients a month. So for a solo practitioner, keyword volume could actually matter if they're in a small area. More importantly, some of these small keyword values in terms of keyword volume, if you're in a small city, you're going to be in business because people in that small city need a lawyer. But at the same time, Google may not be showing the actual keyword volumes for those cities because they're focused more on larger cities, more competition, bigger demographics, things like that. So, we use keyword volume to definitely help us and guide us in the right direction. We do it based upon geography, do it based upon practice areas, do it based upon Google's IP matches with various locations and so forth. But it's not the end all.
Yeah, and that's a perfect summary because, like Pete said, it's not the end all. It is something that matters if that's what matters to that firm. But a perfect example, not analogy, but example that I can use is a personal injury firm that actually specializes in MedNow. And that actually should, anyone that obviously knows the legal industry should almost summarize it right there. Because if your firm is actually honed in on medical malpractice cases, and that's really where you can get the cases that matter, that it's what keeps the lights on at the firm, it's, the cases that are the ones that the firm truly wants, then you're competing in a market that is an exponentially higher market for personal injury. And again, it's not to say that the firm wouldn't take on cases. I'm sure they would take cases that are, let's say dog bites or car accidents or truck accidents or something like that. But if they're specialized in something like MedMal, that search volume is technically most likely going to be lower than what it would be if you're just targeting a blanket term like personal injury. And that's a actual real world example, not theoretical. So, and, for a firm that actually hones in specifically on what they know that they want, they're actually going after something that in theory, in reality is less volume. But yet it's bringing in the higher quality potential new clients that they want.
Yeah, and there are some other ramifications too with your keyword phrasings. If you let's say we're going to target the whole state, because for example, like this state must have a very large keyword volume. All of the personal injury claims in Ohio. But realistically, where are your clients going to come from? You may rank number one from Ohio personal injury, but are you putting your resources in the right place? If you're in Columbus, is someone going to drive to you if they're in Toledo? If you're in Florida and you're number one from Miami, do you have an office in Tallahassee? So you may end up ranking, but not actually having that conversion factor of the ability that people will actually click on you or hire you when your budget could have been placed elsewhere to either covering additional claims or, as you said, Alex, honing in on, okay, I'm going to be number one personal injury in Florida. No, how about being the number one MedMal lawyer in personal injury, in Florida, things like that. So again, the keyword volume matters, but take into the more day-to-day basics. Is someone going to travel to you? Are you going to have the budget to sustain that high volume SEO campaign? It really has a host of factors that you really have to weigh and consider before you just simply pick one.
And as Pete said, it is something that it has to be reviewed from the firm itself, and it's highly contingent. Because if the answer is yes, like imagine they were in Miami and they did want to, get a client in Tallahassee and they do have an office there or they would travel there, then great, go after that. That is the right objective. That is what they should be doing. But yeah, to the point that we're all making, if they don't, well then why cast such a wide net when they should hone in on something that much more particular?
All right, and moving into our next misconception, something that all of our firms really do need to hone into is their reviews. A lot of times law firms shy away from reviews. They say, oh, I don't want to ask for reviews. I don't need the reviews. But unfortunately, your law firm reviews are exponentially important for a huge variety of reasons.
Yeah, I'm going to let Alec go up first on this one. So about reviews, I know he definitely has strong opinions on this.
Yeah, I definitely do, because think about how anybody purchases anything or reviews anything at this point online. If we're all using Amazon and we're looking at a product, if we're all going to a restaurant, we're looking at, what kind of reviews they got. If you're going to a coffee shop, you look at the value of reviews that are there. So there's the human element of it, which is obviously a huge factor, especially when you're measuring yourself up against your competition. If you have exponentially less reviews than your competitors, that's a sign to your potential new clients. So that's something that you want to immediately rectify. That's point number one. Point number two, on a digital marketing level from, the search engine's perspective, it is 100% a metric. It's not the be all and end all metric, but it is for sure something that they do consider. So, when again, the search engines themselves are comparing you to your competition, if you are effectively not in that same level of reviews and how many you've obtained, that's also a signal to them. Again, them being the search engines are going back to say, why are you that quintessential leader? And what better way for you to show that and to prove it to search engines by having someone else that is independent of your website or your marketing give you that accreditation. And that's what reviews do. So it's definitely something that should be considered and definitely makes an impact for sure. That's on the organic side. Really quickly, let me just touch upon the latest also of local service ads. local service ads, as many know, is the ads that now show up on the top of Google. And they are the very tippy top of Google, actually. And you can't get any higher than that. And really what they do is they are paying per lead. And that's how those ads are displayed. But what Google tries to do is make it somewhat, all level equal, if you will, in the fact that it goes to an actual landing page. And so what you then have to prove is show that much more why you have that prominent position on a local level. And one of the factors that they definitively consider on local service ads is the quantity and the number of reviews that you have. So very bluntly, ads may not show if you don't have enough reviews compared to your competitors.
Yeah, I think you covered pretty much everything. My only add-on would be, the actual how to get reviews. I can tell you things that you would want to avoid. That's the best way. So don't have all clients, obviously don't do fake reviews. That'd be bad. Those will get banned. And the second thing is don't have the clients all do the reviews from your office. If you're having offices, because they may be on your local Wi-Fi and they'll all be pinged from that office, that could get you banned too, because they'll think you're doing fake reviews. So what we recommend is having the reviews on Google, having them spread out across the client's ideally valid Google accounts. If they don't have a Google account, they can still post a review. Have it from unique IP addresses across, the city or country, wherever they're from. Make them reviews detailed. If they have other reviews of other companies, that helps out too. There have been instances a lot lately where Google is purging reviews. It has to do with people, posting fake reviews, and they're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater in terms of getting rid of legitimate reviews. And so we have several clients who have had, 20, 40, 50 reviews, and slowly they're down, 10 reviews because some of their old reviews have been caught up in this new algorithm update. And that, it stinks, to be blunt. And they're legit reviews, and you can appeal to Google, but pretty much they have a new algorithm that's culling reviews over time. So the reviews definitely matter.
Yeah. And just to quickly jump in with that you could even filter out who you can give the review option to. Like, for example, a lot of times we don't think about print options, but even if you just had like a flyer or something in like a closing packet, that what you give to your clients when they're done with you, and you could filter out who you're giving this information to. So only the clients that you want to have the easy access to the review would have it. So like I said, there's ways to go about doing it that you don't have this blanket review opportunity. You're giving it to the ones that you want to, or you're asking it from the ones that are most appealing to your firm.
Be careful with that though, because it also technically goes against Google's terms of service. I mean, everyone can review anything, but if you're doing a technical means of like only, I've seen this before where people will send out a blanket email to all their clients, like hundreds and thousands of clients, and then the review is done internally, and then only if they give them 5 stars does it then post to Google. That actually runs afoul of their guidelines, so that you're supposed to post all reviews and so forth. So you just want to make sure that you're not using software that's going to compromise your reviews as well. So. Oh
no, I just meant simply hand it to the clients that you think are actually doing.
I mean, that's just, I don't know if that runs afoul of Google's guidelines. I'm sure they wouldn't like that either, but there's no way they can stop that, whether you just be like, hey, I know you like me, give me a review. So, I mean, that's just human nature. So.
Yeah, just do it in a way that makes sense and doesn't seem shady. We're not doing that. Cool. All right, and for our last misconception, we're going to hit back into what Alex was talking about with the local service ads and the ads on Google, because that simply is just another area where we see a lot of clients having hesitancies about, because we find that the misconception that they have is that pay-per-click ads are a waste of money and nobody clicks on those. So I think we need to just address that and help explain those a little better.
Yeah, pay-per-click can be a waste of money. I'll zag a little bit if it's not set up properly. I've personally managed campaigns before where clients were spending tens of thousands of dollars per month, and you look at the settings and they were dropping half of it on display ads that had no tangible return on investment. And so you go in, you change the settings, you turn off Google's extraneous websites and only do actual search ads. And then lo and behold, they go from $10,000 per month spend down to maybe $1,500 per month spend, and they start getting actual leads. And so it's all about how you set up the campaign, and you need to have, conversion analysis on what actually is leading to you. You need to have click analysis. You need to have, the actual ad analysis. All those matter. And if you're not doing it right, pay-per-click can be a massive waste of money. But at the same time, if you're doing it right, it can be, you can show proof of, positive ROI.
Pete summarized everything really well. It does go though to a standpoint of that mention that I said where it's casting a really wide net versus, let's say line fishing. You're honed in. It's an analogy that I also use where it's, pay-per-click is very much a surgical strike in that you can hone in so specifically. You can get down the zip code. You can get down to you can get down to area code, you can get down to specific, really detailed practice areas and subsets of practice areas that you want to focus on. You can get honed in on income level. And that's something where there is a huge value on a paid level that the organic search may not be able to hone in as precisely. Organic will cast that wide net and potentially capture anyone and everyone, which has a huge value, of course. But the paid side can be surgical. It can get, that precise. That's one of the first things that I also like to address on a value level. And like Pete said, then on a very detailed level, measuring the ROI, that's something that I also think on a paid side too is something that can be definitively done. And I mean, that's one of those things where we can look on a very granular level at what the spend is, what sort of clicks you're getting from it, and then quantify that tangible conversion that's coming in from that and based off of that. The other point that I want to make really quickly too is the misconception that it's only one main search engine, who we all know. It doesn't necessarily have to be Google. There are other options out there, particularly with Bing, where we have seen that by default on Android devices, which, most people are on mobile at this point, and Android devices, use Bing by default a lot. And there is a client that we have worked with in the past that, who has, literally seen a huge exponential increase that has come in from, outside Google, let's say, and it's, the same exposure, the same amount of clicks, the same amount of conversions, but a fraction of the price. And so it's just something to consider because there are all sorts of avenues. And that's what I also like about the paid side. It can be used and utilized differently in each forum, in each medium. And then last but not least, and not to keep droning on about this or belaboring this point, but it also then goes into that value that you are seeing in that return. Again, looking at the measure that you get from your spend, and it can be instant. It's that sprint versus marathon thing that we were talking about earlier. Paid is something where there is not necessarily a huge ramp up time. There's a little bit of ramp up time, but not as much as on the organic side. And so there is a huge value and not a waste in the fact that you can have ads displaying immediately. And that's something that's, I think, valued greatly by firms that are brand new. Someone that's like starting off, and like we were talking about earlier, that analogy of getting a website launched and, getting the marketing to take off and get off the ground. What better way to get exposure than immediately with paid?
Yeah, and I will just jump in with one last point too that we haven't mentioned is that with the pay-per-click ads, there's also external factors here too. Do you have good copy in your pay-per-click ad? Does it say what you need it to say? Does it match what the search you're trying to match it for? And does it go to a good-looking landing page? Does it go to the appropriate page of your site? So again, don't look too far ahead of what you're doing here with your pay-per-click ads. Make sure that everything is in line. Make sure that it goes to a good landing page. Heck, if it goes to your website, make sure that your website looks good. So again, it all kind of comes full circle where your pay-per-click may not be performing because there's other elements that need to be adjusted and fixed as well.
Like you said, Nancy, it's a wonderful way to bookend our conversation because that's actually what we started with. It's, it goes back to the website where the functionality, the form follows function. So when someone's clicking on your ad, and, they're paying per that click, you want it to lead to something that is wonderfully designed and converts.
Precisely. And with that, we will leave you after presenting all of our information here. Hopefully you've learned about the top 10 misconceptions about digital marketing, and you'll keep listening to our podcast. We'll be back with exclusive next month. We hope you have a great time. Thanks for listening.